Thanks for joining us on the Cultured Meat and Future Food podcast. We're excited to have Carrie Chan as the guest for today's episode. Carrie is a seasoned business executive with a passion for the environment, particularly the impact of our food supply on the planet. Her expertise is in general management and project delivery. She's managed major real estate developments from breaking ground to full operation. At Avant Meats, Carrie provides the vision, guides the strategy, and supervises implementation. The company's technology platform focuses on fish and seafood products tailored for the food of consumers in China and in the region. Let's jump right in. Carrie, I'm excited to welcome you to the Cultured Meat and Future Food Show.
Thank you, Alex, for having me. It's my pleasure to share about what we do.
Carrie, tell us a little bit about your background and what you're currently working on.
Yeah, my background is in business, not particularly related to biotech nor food tech, but I have been thinking about what are the ways that I can do in order to contribute to a more sustainable food solution in various ways, from the food supply to how we can reduce waste, etc. And I come across this idea of cultivated meat, which we can produce meat without the animal. I think that is a very amazing idea, and I explored the idea back in 2018, and that's the beginning of Avant Meats. What we're doing at the moment is we already completed our first pilot prototype in 2019, and we're working on our second prototype, which is more structured fish fillet. And as well as, of course, cost reduction. We are also in the middle of scaling up our production of sales as well. Yes, that's a very busy year.
Wow, that's awesome. And you guys were not always working on the fish fillet to start, is that right?
Correct. We started with fish maw, which is a very particular cuisine and ingredient in the Chinese culture. And we started that, we make a prototype of that last year. And so that is completed. We think that in the long run, we want to work on other fish products as well. So we are working on the fish fillet.
Okay, that's great. And so, when you were starting Avant Meats, was there kind of like a specific time where you decided like, I'm going to do this, or many people call it that aha moment?
Yeah, so to go back to my very first, answer is at the beginning, I did not see what I can do about it. The idea is amazing, but I don't have the technical background, namely food nor biotech background to start on it. So my background is business. I had the experience of bringing forth a project from zero to, full operation and managing commercial contract, strategy, coming up with new idea. And at the beginning, I didn't know what I could do about it. And later on, I went to a conference in San Francisco organized by GFI. I learned a lot from it. And I thought, okay, maybe I should give it a try, because I see that unlike other biotech innovation, pharmaceutical innovation, drugs, etc., we are talking about commercialization of a food product. So along that line, there will be a lot of creativity, product development, commercial and business development, which I can contribute my skill set to. And I thought to myself, okay, let me try to find a CTO or CSO. And if it works, then okay, we might have some chance doing that. So I think that is the time I decided, okay, I will give it a go. That was about September 2018, shortly after I came back from the GFI conference.
Great. And how did you end up finding that CSO or CTO?
It is a not very conventional approach. Initially, I basically model it as a hire, as a job opportunity, as an opening, because I realized that it is not that easy to organically come across co-founders, especially in biotech, because for coding and programmer, maybe there are more avenues and events I can go to in order to find somebody. But in this field, it is not that easy. So initially, I listed it out as a job opening on various avenues, LinkedIn, another website here and internationally. And I'm very surprised in a pleasant way, and also very grateful that I did receive a very good number of parties showing interest. So I interact with them, spoke with them, and figure out what they find about Cultured Meat, what they know so far, and whether they have the sustainability kind of mindset, and whether I can work with them, of course, chemistry. And so then I narrowed down to a few shortlisted candidates, and I'm very grateful that in GFI conference, I actually met with our first advisor, which is scientific advisor, Dr. Stephen Cadman, and he has very generously helped me to review the background of these shortlisted parties. And then from there, we identify our CSO, which is Dr. Mario Chin, and we start talking about working together. And that is how it happened. That was early 2019.
Wow, that's great. And so how big is the team now?
We have grown from a team of 2 to now 5 people full-time, 3 of them in R&D, me, myself, and another person on the business administration. And so, team of 5, we're looking to grow to about 8 person towards later part of this year.
Okay, great. And so you're based in Hong Kong currently, and most of the operations are based there as well. Is that correct?
Yes, correct. We are again very thankful to Hong Kong Science Park. We moved in here without the need to refurbish or to do everything from scratch. It is a already furnished laboratory with water, tape and benches and air conditioning and everything in place. We moved in June 2019, and then we can actually start working right away. There are also core facilities we can go to. Basically, we do not need to buy our own equipment, but of course, for convenience sake, we do purchase culture hood, incubator, etc. in our own premise. And so, it worked like that, and we have been pretty happy here. And of course, I think the next question you might be ramping up to is as we scale up, where do we go, correct?
That's correct.
At the moment we're talking, we're actively exploring both Hong Kong and also in the region. We are very focused on the China market. Definitely, that is one of the directions we are looking into, as well as Southeast Asia. Singapore is definitely a hub for the region for alternative protein. And so these are the few places we are doing a very rigorous exercise to gauge the cost we need to set up there and the benefit and our overall strategy.
I want to jump to a question that's more related to time frame. And as we're recording this in April 2020 now, the pandemic has really kind of taken over a lot of operations throughout the world. So how has coronavirus affected your daily operations? And do you think that it will make a change in the industry?
Yeah, that's a very good question. There are a few aspects to it. First of all, fortunately in Hong Kong, we can continue to go to work. Of course, with more stringent measures, everyone is wearing masks, etc., and clean our hand frequently. But we managed to be able to come back to work, so we can continue with the R&D, which I'm very grateful for. So not much delay on that. However, of course, for the procurement of materials from other parts of the world, from US, etc., we need to wait for extra time. So that is, I would say, about a couple of weeks of delay on that because of the material delivery. But other than that, we are fine. We can continue working. And because of the less travel, we are supposed to be in a few conferences around in the different places. Because we do not need to travel, it actually gives us a time to really focus here on our R&D and more focus on the product development, etc. So that is the advantage of this time. And of course, it has some inconvenience that we cannot meet some other industry people or even potential investor face to face. So that are the downside of it. We still try to keep up with that by setting up conference calls and phone calls, etc. And talking about coronavirus, I very much agree with few people talking about the impact of this on our relationship, humanity relationship with food supply, in particular meat and animal protein. We know that there's definitely very strong correlationship between this virus and an area where animals are very packed and coexist with each other for extended period of time, either in a animal farm or in a market. So I think the general publics are aware of that from the swine flu and bird flu, but the impact is not as significant at this time. And so it is very easy to forget about it. This one, we actually very much in the face. Everyone is affected. The magnitude is so huge. And I think it's going to bring a reflection and more deep pondering about whether we should improve and change our way we get our animal products. And of course, one way is to keep it all together, going plant-based, which I totally support. For a lot of other cases where meat is still a very preferred option on the plate, it will trigger people to think about it more specifically. I think it's going to bring awareness and also opportunity in this field.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. And I think obviously if everyone switched to plant-based, these worries would not be as significant, right? But I think that when we talk to traditional meat producers about cultured meat, they oftentimes tell us things like, we have not been consuming cultured meat for generations. How do we know that this will not have a detrimental effect? Do you think that seeing the impact of coronavirus might make either meat producers or general public more concerned about consuming cultured meat specifically? Because we don't know, maybe something potentially as dangerous as the pandemic could come about from cultured meat. Not saying that this is what I'm thinking, but it's totally an argument I can see that could come from the other side.
Yeah, I can totally understand where it comes from when people have the long-term health implication of cultured meat and how it's going to pan out. As a person, which I do not have the technical background, and after diving very deep into the technology, what I understand is the whole activity of cell growth inside animal body, using animal as the medium of converting the food the animal feeds into nutrients that is eventually absorbed by the and taken in and consumed by the cell, and then they turn it into muscle cell and other parts of the body, which is eventually the animal is slaughtered and killed. The whole cell doubling and growing is what I have observed as a layperson, which is also holding a relatively skeptical eye from the beginning. It is not very different. The cell double inside animal body and outside is basically the same, because basically we feed the cell with the same ingredient. We keep them at the same temperature, pH value, etc., so that they can grow and they are healthy. If they can grow, they're definitely healthy. And of course, the regulation of everything that look very closely into the whole process, what ingredient we put into the broth that we feed the cell, and what are the conditions, etc. That will actually help us to provide a much stronger check and balance, as well as on the other hand, that will transpire into credibility for consumers. And so what I see is that in our case, we very focus on the solution that do not use GM, no genetic modification, for various reasons, for the market, for the China, because it's not regulatory wise, it's not allowed. And also in some other markets, like in Europe, it is relatively consumer driven, not preferred approach. So we're very focused on non-GM. So taking that away, what we look at is, okay, do we put in anything that is not natural or could be potentially harmful? But if we look at what we actually feed in the cell, they are no different from what we eat. They are glucose, amino acid, minerals, vitamins from food grade sources. And so we might as well eat the nutrients directly ourselves than feeding the cell. So in that sense, they are totally, I do not see the opportunity of turning into anything harmful. Of course, there are other things that, you control the pH value, and other thing that we do need to have other reagents. So on those, we keep a very close eye on to make sure that they are food grade and up to the standard that is acceptable for use as food consumption. So this is what I see, and I think it is very similar to the traditional food of probiotics, yogurt. And in a very extreme analogy, it is kind of like IVF, the two cell, like egg and sperm, they do the action outside of the person's body, and they are totally fine. They get back into human body. And I have friends, and I have my mom's generation's friends who go through the IVF, and I see people are totally healthy and normal. So we might see it that way, and it's very new to the mind, but with a lot of the things that is in place, I think it is one of the very promising solution to go without major health impact. And I would say it would be better because we get rid of all of the pollutants, antibiotics, etc. in the food supply system.
So, to continue to step back from meat and seafood specifically, Avant Meats is going into new directions when it comes to products, not only from, I guess, the fish maw to the fish fillet, but also dietary supplements. So, tell us about these products and how everything really stems together.
Yeah. We, as a startup company, we focus on two areas. At the moment, R&D is definitely the core part. We make sure that we get to the cost reduction. We can reach upon that. We can reach price parity. We can scale up. And so that's a core. On the other hand, we are doing product development. Product development, it could be many different directions, not just traditional grocery fish fillet products. We see that there are a lot of other applications that we can make use of. And honestly, seeing it in another perspective, there are so many other aspects of our life which is still relying on animal component, which they need to be totally displaced of at one point so that we can actually get animal away from all the supply chain. So the supplement that you talk about is one of the idea that we think some of our potential clients, we work on B2B model, some of our potential clients may be interested. The concept is no different from people taking protein powder. For example, those people who are concerned about exercising and having a more precise intake of clean protein and pure protein and no fat, etc., for their regime of working out and bodybuilding, etc. Now the go-to solution would be whey powder. It could be soy powder and plant-based powder, and fish can be one of the options out there. And there are definitely benefit in it because we are working with fish maw and other part of fish which can have a bit more functional protein in it, for example, collagen, etc. So we see that there would be application for that. So that's why we have come up with that conceptual brand for the supplement. We put it under a brand called Cellulin. And this is something that we are seeing that it could be one of the product go-to-market. And we have another conceptual brand, which is more for the food product, fish fillet, fish cake, even fish ball, etc., under another brand, which is called Avi. We see that we need to go multiple line in order to broaden the application and so that more people can actually try it out and also get more used to the cultivated meat application. It's not just one chunk of fillet. So that's why we do it.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's super cool. And so when we originally spoke, I think it's coming up close to about 2 years ago now. I think it was in 2018, maybe the later half of 2018. We had a really interesting discussion about imitation meat. And so on the show, I'd like to explore this. Do you think that imitation meat could be an issue when cell-cultured animal products come to market? And to shed some additional light, I think we were talking about how cell-cultured meat potentially will come at a premium when it is first released to market. And there could be people that are selling animal agriculture derived meat as cultured meat, especially if we are seeing this kind of like very one-to-one. So I guess kind of bring that conversation back a couple of years later, do you think that that could still be an issue?
I recall that we were talking about a certain market, in particular, certain part of the world, including the China market, where it is quite easy to, when you have a very interesting and attractive and popular product proposition or some product existing in the market, there are definitely copycats and knockoff out there who pretend that to be using the same technology, having the same benefits like cleaner and healthier and no pollution, etc., and pretending to be using the same kind of thing, but actually they're not. And then they will benefit from the premium that the actual real product using the technology can combine. And so I remember that was about it. Yeah?
Yeah, no, exactly.
Okay. Whether this issue or this consideration is still exists, I think it definitely a different market and the commercial side of it is quite different, I would have to say. I would not expect this will be the case, for example, in US or in Europe. But in Asia, China or some other countries in Asia, I would definitely not be surprised if we find something like this down the line. For example, when we have launched a product and people are crazy about it and happy and popular, and then there will be definitely some copycats who pretend to be, but they're actually not. So along the line, I think what I see most of the time, this is one extra risk we address this market, but this also gives us another opportunity. For example, when we go to the market, the packaging or the distribution channel, we need to think more along that line. And this will give us more opportunity in the way, for example, when we talk about fish, maybe your audience may have read about it. Provenance is a problem. So a lot of the time in China, in Korea, in some fish market, they claim that this is a certain fish species, but doing DNA of that, they're actually not that kind of fish. It's totally not related, but then they look very similar. So in our case, one of the things is that you can be very sure what is the fish species, the provenance, where is it coming from, and it will give an extra peace of mind and extra guarantee and promise to the consumer and the product, not just on the health benefit and the cleanliness of that, but also are they really consuming, for example, grouper is very popular here. Are they really consuming a certain species of grouper, for example? And this will strengthen our market positioning when we compare side by side conventional product to our product. I see that there will be advantage on that. We still need to be smart about making sure that we find a way that people can easily identify our product is using this technology, but it is not any other copycats. So it's a very interesting and it's another dimension for this market that we address too.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting thing to think about, especially as we are getting closer to potential release of these products.
Yes.
So I know that you have a business background. I want to ask about what kind of resources you used when you were starting out to learn more about cell-cultured meat in general, whether it was related to kind of like the business aspects of the industry or even some of the scientific aspects.
Yeah, I think I would give a very huge credit to the Good Food Institute. They really make the whole understanding of the technology landscape and even on the commercial aspect of it very easy to grasp. And I imagine I'm working on another technology industry. I would have to pull in a lot more extra hours and time to understand the inside out of it in order to combine, because in the business here, we are really combining technology, commercialization, and the business side of it. So as a business person, I do need to know the technology, the key essence of it. And the Good Food Institute material help a lot from this understanding of, what is cell line and why the cost is so expensive. For the scale up, what are the trends being and the cost reduction, as well as the scaffold and material, which is written by Liz and Elliot from GFI. They are a lot of the time I go to reference and I refer to people who are new to this new industry, are interested in diving deep. I would refer them to that. And of course, on top of that, once I'm in this community, I get to know a lot of more resources, which is very updated and curated. For example, here, CMS, podcast, and the newsletter. There's another newsletter more focused on APAC by Michal. And I think these keep us very updated for people in the industry to know what is developing. And these are all of my very frequent go-to resources for the business.
Great. Yeah. And the stuff that Dr. Elliot Schwartz puts out is really, really awesome. And I would say overall, I think the Asia Pacific region has been, because we're starting to see new startups pop up in that region, we're starting to see a lot more activity there in general.
Yes, indeed. I think, and I hope that would getting more momentum as well. I would have to say that Asia is still warming up to that. A lot of the thing is still happening in US and Israel and EU, but we are picking up. It is not just for startup, but also investors. And we are situated here, and there are investors who do not previously invest in food, but then they see the potential of this industry and this area. They start getting more interested. But at the beginning, they will be relatively, they need to take time to get themselves educated and get themselves warm up and get themselves familiar with looking at various companies, what they're doing. And so they decide which is going along with their strategy and align with the investment mandate, etc. But it's definitely happening.
So the next question is a tough one. And few people can answer it in a way that would make everyone happy, right? Are there any estimates that you may have for when Avant Meat products might be coming to the market?
So we make a rational deduction of that. So we are scaling up. So we reckon that for the fish food product, either it is a fish fillet or a fish cake, etc. to begin with, or even for the supplement, everything that we put it, inside our mouth, we need to get the pre-market approval. So the timeline is very much subject to the regulatory development here. We are following US very closely as well as Singapore. And both are working very hard to drive a framework as soon as possible. We are making an estimate that the legislation may be in place in a year or two. Now it's 2020, and hopefully that will be something announced or gazetted 2021 or 2020. But after that, we still need to, based on that legislation, we need to file a application for the food license so that we can start selling. So that easily takes another half year to about a year. And so based on this assumption, it would be late 2022 or early 2023 for a product that we can start selling. Having said that, we are already speaking with food company using our technology for their product line development, because the whole process takes time to develop, even for incorporating our ingredient in the existing product line, replacing some of the ingredient there. It takes a lot of time. So we are already speaking to food company in order to explore that. And hopefully by the time the formula is there, the legislation is there, the license is there, then we can go to market. So this is what we think. That will be 2022, 2023 will be much later than we would have scaled up by then. So that is really the critical point in what we see. And of course, in a commercial strategy, we are also looking at other applications which we might go to market earlier than that. So we will have something to share a bit later this year when it's ready.
Oh, that's exciting. And so your team is looking into both going to ingredient manufacturers, but then also potentially to release your own product, or only on the ingredient side?
We at the moment focus more on the ingredient side. We still want to do a brand because we want it to be a branded ingredient, and because we really contain the technology behind it, and it's very easy imagine it is Avant Meats, Cross, and other food product brand. We can bring a new talking point. We can bring the sustainability to the new product line. We can bring a lot of more attention when we partner with another food product company. So that's why we also want to do a branding for ingredient at the same time, even though we might not first start off to do our own retail product brand.
We briefly touched on regulation a little bit, but what is the typical process for releasing a new food product in Hong Kong specifically?
Hong Kong, we have spoken with a couple of parties related. There would not be, to our understanding, there's not a process in place whereby it will come up with a new legislation for the cultivated meat. And so what we have observed from the prevailing practice is for food and drugs and other things, if we get the approval from a other major jurisdiction, we will use that approval to go to the relevant government department in Hong Kong. Of course, for food, they will also do another check, for example, whether the food contains any pathogens, etc. But for the other parts, we will use the other country's approval to back that up. So we see it probably will happen that way because it does not need to duplicate in terms of the regulation. And to share a little bit more, since we are the first cultivated meat company in China, we participate in a certain closed-door meeting and with relevant parties. We understand that China also looking into a set of regulation for cultivated meat as well as a couple of related alternative protein technology in this field. And so my understanding is that it will also develop quite quickly in China, but then we don't know how fast it will go, whether it will be even faster than Singapore, we don't know. But before that, we can make a lot of reference to US and Singapore and perhaps China as well by the time we reach the pre-launching time. And so with all of this reference, we can basically launch in Hong Kong with a little bit of extra simple documentation. We see that it will happen that way.
You can get in touch with Carrie on LinkedIn and learn more about Avant Meats at www.avantmeats.com. Carrie, do you have any last insights for our listeners today?
Yes, I think I would have to say a few words for the audience who are considering getting into this industry, in particular, young people who are thinking about what to study, get into the biotech. I think just like other technology, IT, computing, AI, etc., biotech is definitely one of the key development in the next multiple decades. And we need a lot more talent. We need more people working in this field. So I hope this is something of interest. And if you're starting to have any interest, and I think this is a very promising career direction. I see that once us and other company they grow, we need a full army of scientists, engineers in this field in order to make it work. And it is a very different workforce than we see now. It will be quite different. Yeah. So we see the need of that, and this is time to start building that up.
Very well said. Carrie, thank you so much for being with us today on the Cultured Meat and Future Food Show.
Thank you very much, Alex. It's my pleasure, and thank you so much for the opportunity.
This program was produced by H Media. We'll see you soon.